First of all, start off with saying I apologize. I didn't keep to what I promised, and now we're here. I'll get this done because I promised it to you guys, and I shouldn't make empty promises. I still think everyone who listens, that's a surprise to me. But I hope that I can be able to get through this today. Thank you, and let's get into this. Chapter 7 Maneuvering. Sun Tzu said, "In war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign. Having collected an army and concentrated his forces, he must blend and harmonize the different elements, therefore, before pitching his camp. After that comes tactical maneuvering, than which there is nothing more difficult. The difficulty of tactical maneuvering consists in turning the devious into the direct, and misfortune into gain. Thus, to take a long and circumspicious route, after enticing the enemy out of the way, and though starting after him, to convince to reach the goal before him, showing knowledge of the artifice of deviation. Maneuvering with an army is an advantage, with an undiscipled multitude, most dangerous. If you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are that you will be too late. On the other hand, to detach a flying column for the purpose involves the sacrifice of its baggage and stores. Thus, if you order your men to roll up their buff coats and make forced marches without halting day or night, covering double the usual distance at a stretch, doing 100 li in order to wrest an advantage, the leaders of all three divisions will fall into the hands of the enemy. The stronger men will be in the front, the jaded ones will fall behind, and on this plan only 1/10 of your army will reach its destination. If you march 50 li in order to outmaneuver an enemy, you will lose the leader of your first division, and only half your forces will reach the goal. If you march 30 li with the same objective, 2/3 of your army will arrive. We may take it then that an army without its baggage train is lost. Without provisions, it is lost. Without bases of supply, it is lost. We cannot enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors. We are not fit to lead an army on march unless we are familiar with the forces of the country, its mountains, its forests, its pitfalls, its precipitals, its marshes and swamps. We shall be unable to turn natural advantages to account unless we make use of local guides. In war, practice dissimulation, and you will succeed. Whether to concede or to divide your troops must be decided by circumstances. Lest your rapidity be that of the wind, your compactness that of the forest. In raiding and plundering, be like fire, its movability like a mountain. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night. When you move, fall like a thunderbolt. When you plunder a countryside, let the spoil be divided amongst your men. When you capture new territory, cut it up into allotments for the benefit of the soldiery. Ponder it and deliberate before you make a move. He will conquer who has learnt the artifice of deviation. Such is the art of maneuvering. The Book of Army Management says, "On the field of battle, the spoken word does not carry far enough, hence the institution of gongs and drums. Nor can ordinary objects can be seen clearly enough, hence the institution of banners and flags. Gongs and drums, banners and flags are means whereby the ears and eyes of the host may be focused on one particular point. The host thus forming a single united body. Is it impossible, either for the brave to advance alone, or for the cowardly to retreat alone? This is the art of handling large masses of men. In the night fighting, then, make much use of single fires and drums, and in the fight of day, of flags and banners as a means of influencing the ears and eyes of your army. A whole army may be robbed of its spirit. The commander-in-chief may be robbed of his presence of mind. Now a soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning. By noonday it has begun to flag, and in the evening his mind is only bent on returning to camp. A clever general, therefore, avoids an army when its spirit is keen, but attacks it when it is sluggish and inclined to return. This is the art of studying moods. Disciplined and calm, to await the appearance of disorder and hubbub among the enemy. This is the art of retaining self-possession. To be near the goal while the enemy is still far from it. To wait at ease while the enemy is toiling or struggling. To be well fed while the enemy is famished. This is the art of husbanding one's strength. To refrain from intercepting an enemy whose banners are in perfect order. To refrain from attacking an army drawn up in calm and confident array. This is the art of studying circumstances. It is military axiom not to advance uphill against the enemy, nor to oppose him when he comes downhill. Do not pursue an enemy who simulates flight. Do not attack soldiers whose temper is keen. Do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. Do not interfere with an army that is returning home. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Such is the art of warfare. Chapter 8. Variations in Tactic. Sun Tzu said, "In war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign, collects his army, and concentrates his forces. When in a different country, do not encamp. In country where high roads intersect, join hands with your allies. Do not linger in dangerously isolated positions. In hemmed-in situations, you must resort to stratagem. In desperate position, you must fight. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. The general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics knows how to handle his troops." The general who does not understand these may be well acquainted with the configuration of the country, yet he will not be able to turn his knowledge to practical account. So, the student of war, who is unversed in the art of war, of varying his plans, even though he be acquainted with the 5 advantages, will fail to make the best use of his men. Hence is the wise leader's plans, considerations of advantage and disadvantage will be blended together. If our expectation of advantage be tempered in this way, we may succeed in accomplishing the essential part of our schemes. If, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune, reduce the hostile chiefs by inflicting damage on them, and make trouble for them, and keep them constantly enraged, hold out specious allurements, and make sure they rush to any given point. The art of war teaches us not to rely on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive them, not on the chance of his not attacking, but on the fact that we made our position unassailable. There are 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. Recklessness, which leads to destruction. Cowardice, which leads to capture. A hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. A delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. Over solitude, for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. These are the 5 besetting sins of a general, ruinous to the conduct of war. When an army is overthrown and its leader slain, the cause will surely be found amongst these 5 dangerous faults. Let them be a subject of meditation. Chapter 9. The Army on the March. Sun Tzu said, "We come now to the question of the encamping army, and observing signs of the enemy. Pass quickly over the mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys. Camp in high places, facing the sun. Do not climb heights in order to fight. So much for a mountain warfare. After crossing a river, you should get far away from it. When invading forces cross a river in its onward march, do not advance to meet it midstream. It will be best to let half the army get across, then deliver your attack. If you are anxious to fight, you should not go and meet the invader near the river, where he has to cross. Moor your craft higher than the enemy, and facing the sun. Do not move upstream to meet the enemy. So much for river warfare. In crossing salt marshes, your sole concern should be get over them quickly, without any delay. If forced to fight in a salt marsh, you should have water and grass near you, and get your back to a clump of trees. So much for operations in salt marshes. In dry level country, take up an easy, accessible position with rising ground to your right and on your rear, so that the danger may be in the front and safely lie behind. So much for campaigning in flat country. These are the 4 useful branches of military knowledge which enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish 4 several sovereigns. All armies prefer high ground to low and sunny places to dark. If you are careful of your men and camp on hand ground, the army will be free from disease of every kind and will spell victory. When you come to a hill or a bank, occupy the sunny side. When the slope of your rear, thus you will be once art and act for the benefit of your soldiers, and utilize the natural advantages of the ground. When in consequences of heavy rains of country, a river which you wish to ford is swollen and freckled with foam, you must wait until it subsides. Country is which there are precipitous cliffs with torrents running between deep natural hollows, confined places, tangled thickets, quagmires, and crevices should be left with all possible speed and not approached. While we keep away from such places, we should get the enemy to approach them. While we face them, we should let the enemy have them on his rear. If in the neighborhood of your camp there should be a hilly county, ponds surrounded by the aquatic grass, hollow basins filled with reeds, or woods with thick undergrowth, they must be carefully rooted out and searched, for these are places where men in ambush or insidious spies are likely to be lurking. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he is relying on the natural strength of his position. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. If his place of encampment is easy to access, he is tendering a bait. Movement amongst the trees of a forest shows that the enemy is advancing. The appearance of numerous screens in the midst of thick grass means that the enemy wants to make us suspicious. The rising of birds in their flight is a sign of an ambuscade. Startled beasts indicate the sudden attack is coming. When there is dust rising in a high column, is a sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low but spread over a wide area, it besokens an advance of infantry. When it branches out in different directions, it shows that parties have been sent to collect firewood. And few clouds of dust moving to and fro signify the enemy is encamping. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to attack are signs he will retreat. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on the wings, it is a sign the enemy is forming a battle. Peace proposals unaccompanied by a sworn covenant indicate a plot. When there is much running about and soldiers fall into rank, it means that a critical moment has come. When such are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. When the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. If birds gather up on any spot, it is unoccupied. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. If there's any disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedation is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means their men are weary. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills cattle for food, and when the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing they will not return to their tents, you may know they have been determined to fight to the death. The sight of men whispering together in small knots or speaking in subdued tones points to dissatisfaction among rank and file. Too frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress. Begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright into the enemy's numbers shows a supreme lack of intelligence. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. If the enemy's troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time without either joining battle or taking themselves off again, the situation is one that deems great vigilance and circumcision. If our troops are no more in number than that of the enemy, it is amply sufficient, if only it means that no direct attack can be made. What we do is simply to concentrate all available strength. Keep a close watch on the enemy and obtain reinforcements. He who exercises no forethought but makes light of his opponents is to be captured by them. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive, and, unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If, when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by the means of iron discipline. This is the certain road to victory. If in training soldiers' commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. If a general shows confidence in his men, but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. Chapter 10. Terrain. Sun Tzu said, "We may distinguish 6 kinds of terrain to visit, to wit, accessible ground, entangling ground, temporizing ground, narrow passes, precipitous heights, positions at great distance from the enemy. Ground, which can be freely traversed by both sides, is called accessible. With regard to ground of its nature, be before the enemy is occupying the raised and sunny spots, and carefully guard your line of supplies. Then you will be able to fight with advantage. Ground which can be abandoned but is hard to reoccupy is called entangling. From a position of this sort, if the enemy is unprepared, you may sally forth and defeat him. But if the enemy is prepared for your coming, and you fail to defeat him, then, return being impossible, disaster will ensure. When the position is such that neither side will gain by marking the first move, it's called temporizing ground. In a position of this sort, even though the enemy should offer us an attractive bait, it will be advisable not to stir forth, but rather to retreat. Thus, enticing the enemy to in his turn. Then, when part of his army has come out, we may deliver our attack with advantage. With regard to narrow passes, if you can occupy them first, let them be strongly garrisoned and await the avert of the enemy. Should the army forestall you in occupying a pass, do not go after him in the pass is fully garrisoned, but only if it is weakly garrisoned. With regard to precipitous heights, if you are beforehand with your adversary, you should occupy the raised and sunny spots, and then wait for him to come up. If the enemy has occupied them before you, do not follow him, but retreat and try to entice him away. If you are situated at a great distance from the enemy, and the strength of the 2 armies are equal, it is not easy to provoke a battle, and fighting will be your disadvantage. There are 6 principles that are connected with earth. The general who's attained a responsible post must be careful to study them. Now an army is exposed to several calamities, not arising from natural causes, but from the faults for which the general is responsible. These are flight, insubordination, collapse, ruin, disorganization, and rout. Other conditions being equal, if one force is hurled against another 10 times its size, the result will be the flight of the former. When the common soldiers are too strong and their officers too weak, the result is insubordination. When the officers are too strong and the common soldiers are weak, this result is collapse. When the higher officers are angry and insubordinate, and on meeting the enemy give battle of their own account from the feeling of resentment, before the commander-in-chief can tell whether or not he is in position to fight, The result is ruin. When the general is weak and without authority, when his orders are not clear and distant, when there are no fixed duty assigned to officers and men, and ranks are formed in solidly haphazard manner, the result is utter disorganization. When a general, unable to estimate the enemy's strength, allows an inferior force to engage a larger one, or hurls a weaker detachment against a powerful one, and neglects to place packed soldiers in the front rank, the result must be rout. There are 6 ways of courting defeat, which must be quickly and carefully noted by the general who has attained a reasonable post. A natural formation of the country is the soldier's best ally, but the estimation of the adversary, of controlling the forces of victory, and the shrewdly calculating difficulties, dangers, and distances, constitutes the test of a great general. He who knows these things, and in fight puts his knowledge in practice, will win battles. He who knows them not, nor practices them, will surely be defeated. If fighting is to result in victory, then you must fight, even though the ruler forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight, even if at the ruler's bidding. The general who advances without coveting fame and retreats without fearing disgrace, whose only thought is to protect his country and do good service for his sovereign, is the jewel of the kingdom. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. If, however, you are indulgent, but unable to make your authority felt, kind-hearted, but unable to enforce your commands, and incapable, moreover, of quelling disorder, then your soldiers must be likened to spoilt children. They are useless for any practical purpose. If we know that our own men are in the condition to attack, but unaware that the enemy is not open to attack, we have gone only halfway towards victory. If we know that the enemy is open to attack, but are unaware that our own men are not in the condition to attack, we have only gone halfway towards victory. If we know that the enemy is open to attack, and we also know our men are in the condition to attack, but are unaware that the nature of the ground makes fighting impracticable, we have still only gone halfway towards victory. Hence the experienced soldier, once in motion, is never bewildered. Once he has broken camp, he is never at a loss. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy, and you know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt. If you know the heaven and you know earth, you may make your victory complete. Chapter 11. The 9 Situations. Sun Tzu said, the art of war recognizes 9 varieties of ground. Dispersive ground, facile ground, contentious ground, open ground, ground of intersecting highways, serious ground, difficult ground, hemmed-in ground, desperate ground. When a chieftain is fighting his own territory, it's dispersive ground. When he has penetrated into hostile territory, but to no great distance, it is facile ground. Ground the possession of which imports great advantage to either side is contentious ground. Ground of which each side has the liberty of movement is open ground. Ground which forms the key to 3 contiguous states, so that he who occupies it first has most of the empire at his command, is a ground of intersecting highways. When an army has penetrated into the heart of the hostile country, leaving a number of fortified cities in its rear, it is serious ground. Mountain forests, rugged steeps, marshes, and fens, all country that is hard to traverse, this is difficult ground. Ground which is reached through narrow gorges, and from which we can only retire by tortuous paths, so that a small number of men and enemies would suffice to crush a large body of men. This is hemmed-in ground. Ground on which we can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay is desperate ground. On dispersive ground, therefore, fight not. On facile ground, halt not. On contentious ground, attack not. On open ground, do not try to block the enemy's way. On ground of intersecting highways, join hands with your allies. On serious ground, gather and plunder. In difficult ground, keep steady on the march. On hemmed-in ground, resort to stratagem. On desperate ground, fight. Those who were called skillful leaders of old knew how to drive a wedge between the enemy's front and rear, to prevent cooperation between his large and small divisions, to hinder the good troops from rescuing the bad, the officers from rallying their men. When the enemy men are united, they manage to keep them in disorder. When it was to their advantage, they make a forward move. When otherwise, they stop still. If they ask how to cope, with great host of the enemy in orderly array, and on point of marching to the attack, I would say, begin by seizing something which your opponent holds dear. Then he will be amenable to your will. Repeatedly is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unreadiness. Make your way by unexpected routes, and attack unguarded spots. The following are the principles to be observed by an invading force. The further you penetrate into a country, the greater will be the solidarity of your troops. Thus the defenders will not prevail against you. Make forays in fertile country in order to supply your army with food. Carefully study the well-being of your men, and do not overtax them. Concentrate your energy and hoard your strength. Keep your army continually on the move, and devise unfathomable plans. Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve. Officers and men alike will put forth their utmost strength. Soldiers, when desperate straits, lose the sense of fear. If there is no place of refuge, they will stand firm. If they are in a hostile country, they will show a stubborn front. If there is no help for it, they will fight hard. Thus, without waiting or warning to be marshaled, the soldiers will continuously and constantly on the qui vive, without waiting to be asked. They will do your will without restrictions. They will be faithful without giving orders. They can be trusted. Prohibit the taking of omens, and do away with superstition doubts. Then, until death itself comes, no calamity needs to be feared. If our soldiers are not overburdened with money, it is not because they have a distress for riches or distaste. If their lives are not unduly long, it is not because they are disinclined to longevity. On the day they are ordered out to battle, your soldiers may weep. Those sitting up bedweeding their garments, and those lying down letting the tears run down their cheeks. But letting them once be brought to the bay, they will display the courage of a chow or a quay. The skillful tactician may be likened to the shui jan. Now the shui jan is a snake that is found in the Jiang'an mountains. Strike at its head and you will be attacked by its tail. Strike at its tail and you will be attacked by its head. Strike at its middle and you will be attacked by a head and tail both. Asked if an army can be made to imitate the Shao Jiang, I answer yes. For the men of Wu and the men of Ye are enemies. Yet if they are crossing a river in the same boat and are caught by a storm, they will come to each other's assistance, just as the left hand helps the right. Hence, it is not enough to put one's trust in the tethering of horses and the burying of chariot wheels in the ground. The principle of which to manage an army is to set up a standard of courage which all must reach. How to make the best of both strong and weak, that is a question involving the proper use of ground. Thus the skillful general conducts his army just as though he was leading a single man, willy-nilly by the hand. It is the business of a general to be quiet and thus ensure secrecy, upright and just, and thus maintain order. He must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance. Altering his arrangements and changing his plans, he keeps the enemy without definite knowledge. By shifting his camp and taking circuitous routes, he prevents the enemy from anticipating his purpose. At the critical moment, the leader of an army acts like one who has climbed up a height and then kicks away the ladder beneath him. He carries his men deep into hostile territory before he shows his hand. He burns his boats and breaks his cooking pots like a shepherd driving a flock of sheep. He drives his men this way and that, and knows nothing whither he is going. To muster his host and bring it into danger, this may be termed the business of a general. The different measurements suited to the 9 varieties of ground, the expediency of aggressive or defensive tactics, and the fundamental laws of human nature, these are things that must certainly be studied. When invading a hostile territory, the general principle is, the penetratingly deep brings cohesion, penetrating but a short way means dispersion. When you leave your own country behind and take your army across neighborhood territory, you'll find yourself on critical ground, where there are means of communication on all four sides. The ground is one of intersecting highways. When you penetrate deeply into a country, it is serious ground. When you penetrate but a little way, it is factal ground. When you have the enemy's strongholds on your rear and narrow passes in the front, it is hemmed-in ground. When there is no place of refuge at all, it is desperate ground. Therefore, on dispersive ground, I would inspire my men with unity of purpose. On factal ground, I would see that there is close connection between all parts of my army. On contentious ground, I would hurry up my rear. On open ground, I would keep a vigilant eye on my defenses. On ground of intersecting highways, I would consolidate my alliances. On serious ground, I would try to ensure a continuous stream of supplies. On difficult ground, I would keep pushing on along the road. On hemmed-in ground, I would block any way of retreat. On desperate ground, I would proclaim to my soldiers the hopelessness of saving their lives. For it is the soldier's disposition to offer an obstinate resistance when surrounded, to fight hard when he cannot help himself, and to obey promptly when he has fallen into anger. We cannot enter an alliance with neighboring princes until we are acquainted with their designs. We are not fit to lead an army on a march unless we are familiar with the faces of the country, its mountains, its forests, its pitfalls, its precipitals, its marshes, its swamps. We shall be unable to turn natural advantages to account unless we use of local guides. To be ignored by any one of the following 4 of the 5 principles does not fit a warlike prince. When a warlike prince attacks a powerful state, his generalship shows itself in preventing the concentration of enemy forces. He overawes his opponents, and their allies are prevented from joining him. Hence, he does not strive to ally himself with all and sundry, nor does he foster the power of other states. He carries out his own secret designs, keeping his antagonists in awe. Thus, he is able to capture their cities and overthrow their kingdoms. Bestow rewards without regard to rule. Issue orders without regard to previous arrangements, and you will be able to handle a whole army as though you had to with but a single man. Confront your soldiers with the deed itself. Never let them know your design. When the outlook is bright, bring it before their eyes, but tell them nothing when the situation is gloomy. Place your army in deadly peril, and will plunge into desperate straits, and will come off in safety. For it is precisely when a force has fallen into harm's way that it is capable of striking a blow for victory. Success in warfare is gained by carefully accommodating ourselves to the enemy's purpose. By persistently hanging on the enemy's flank, we shall succeed in the long run in killing the commander-in-chief. This is the ability to accomplish a thing by sheer cunning. On the day that you take your command, block the frontier passes, destroy the official tallies, and stop the passage of all emissaries. By stern as a council member, so that you may control the situation. If the enemy leaves the door open, you must rush in. Forestall your opponent by seizing what he holds dear, and subtly contrive to time his arrival on the ground. When in path, defied by rule, and accommodate yourself to the enemy until you can reach and fight a decisive battle. At first, then exhibit the coyness of a maiden until the enemy gives you an opening. Afterwards, emulate the rapidity of a running hare. It will be too late for the enemies to oppose you. Chapter 12. The Attack of Fire. Sun Tzu said, there are 5 ways of attacking with fire. The first is to burn soldiers in their camp. The second is to burn stores. The third is to burn baggage trains. The fourth is to burn arsenals and magazines. The fifth is to hurl dropping fire amongst the enemy. To carry out an attack, we must have means available. The material for raising fire should always be kept in readiness. There is proper season for marking attacks with fire, and special days for starting a conflagration. Proper season is when the weather is very dry. The special days of those when the moon is in the constellations of the Sieve, the Wall, the Wing, or the Crossbar, for these four are all days of rising wind. In attacking with fire, you should be prepared to meet 5 possible developments. When fire breaks out inside to enemy's camp, respond at once with an attack from without. If there is an outbreak of fire, the enemy soldiers remain quiet, bide your time, and do not attack. When the forces of flames have reached its height, follow it up with an attack, if that is practical. If not, stay where you are. If it is possible to make an assault with fire from without, do not wait for it to break out within, but deliver your attack at a favorable moment. When you start a fire, be to windward of it. Do not attack from the leeward. A wind that rises in the daytime lasts long, but a night breeze soon falls. In every army, the 5 developments connected with fire must be known, the movements of the stars calculated, and the watch kept for proper days. Hence, those who use fire as an aid to the attack show intelligence. Those who use water as an aid to the attack gain extension and strength. By means of water, an enemy must be intercepted, but not robbed of all his belongings. Unhappy is the fate of one who tries to win his battles and succeed in his attacks without cultivating the spirit of enterprise, for the result in waste of time and general stagnation. And hence the saying, the enlightened ruler lays his plans well ahead. The good general cultivates his resources. Move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your soldiers unless there is something to be gained. Fight not unless the position is critical. No ruler should be put into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight the battle simply out of pique. If it is to your advantage, move a forward move. If not, stay where you are. Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by contempt. But a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never come again into being, nor can the dead ever come back to life. Hence the enlightened ruler is heedful, and the good general filled with caution. This is the way to keep a country at peace and an army intact. Chapter 13. The Use of Spies. Sun Tzu said, raising a host of 100,000 men and marching them great distances entails heavy loss of the people and a drain on the resources of the state. The daily expenditure will amount to 1,000 ounces of silver. There will be commotion at home and abroad, and the men will drop down exhausted on the highways. As many as 700,000 families will be impeded in their labor. Hostile armies may face each other for years, striving for the victory which is decided in a single day. This being so, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's condition, simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver and honors and emulates, is the height of inhumanity. One who acts thus is the leader of no men, no precinct to help to his sovereign, no master of victory. Thus, what enables a wise sovereign and a good general strike and conquer, to achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men, is foreknowledgeable. Now that the foreknowledgeable can be incited from spirits, it cannot be attained inductively from experience, nor by deductive calculation. Knowing of the enemy's disposition can only be attained from other men. Hence the use of spies, of which there are 5 classes: local spies, inward spies, coveted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies. 5 kinds of spies are at work. None can discover the secret system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads. It is the sovereign's most precious faculty. Having local spies means employing the services of the inhabitants of the district. Having inward spies means making use of officials of the enemy. Having coveted spies means getting hold of the enemy's spies and using them for our own purpose. Having doomed spies, doing certain things openly for purpose of deception, and allowing our spies to know of them and report them to the enemy. Surviving spies. Finally, are those who are come back with news from the enemy's camp. Hence is that which none in the whole army have more intimate relations to be maintained than with spies. None should be more liberally rewarded, and nor the business should greater secrecy can be preserved. Spies cannot be usefully employed without a certain intuitive sagacity. They cannot be properly managed without benevolence and straightforwardness. Without settled ingenuity of mind, one cannot make certain of the truth of their reports. Be subtle, and use your spies for every kind of business. If a secret piece of news is divulged by a spy before the time is right, he must be put to death together with the men to whom the secret was told. Whether the object be to crush an enemy, to storm a city, or to assassinate an individual, it is always necessary to begin by finding out the names of the attendants, the aides of the camp, and doorkeepers and sentries of the general in command. Our spies must be commissioned to discern these. The enemy spies who have come to spy on us must be sought out, tempted by bribes, led away and comfortably housed. Thus they will become coveted spies and available for our service. It is through the information brought by the coveted spy that we are able to acquire and employ local and inward spies. It is owing to his information again that we can cause the doomed spy to carry false tidings to the enemy. Finally, it is by his information that the surviving spy can be used on appointed occasions. The end and aim of spying in all five varieties is knowledge of the enemy, and this knowledge can only be derived, in the first instance, from the coveted spy. Hence, it is essential that the coveted spy be treated with utmost liberality. Of old, the rise of the Yin dynasty was due to Dai-Chi, who had served under the Haixia. Likewise, the rise of the Joy dynasty was due to Liu Yai, who had served under the Yin. Hence, it is only the enlightened ruler and the wise general who will use the highest intelligence of the army for purposes of spying, and therefore they achieve great results. Spies are a most important element in war, because on them depends an army's ability to move. And that is the art of war. Thank you all for listening, and if you want me to read another book, please suggest it. Otherwise, I will find a new series to read. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.